Hey there, this is That News You Care About, a weekly video game news show from the folks over at That Nerdy Site. Today is Monday, June 29th, 2020, and I'm one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson. Joining me this week is my Phoenix son, Trevor Starkey. How you doing,
Hello,
Trev?
Logan. I'm doing okay. How you doing?
I'm doing alright, too. Yeah, it's a muggy, dreary-looking day in Austin, but nonetheless, it's going, it's happening. It's a Monday.
Yep, it is. It is indeed a Monday.
Speaking of Mondays, Mixer. Tell me about it, Trev.
So yeah, this broke last Monday
Mm-hmm.
before we would have recorded last week's episode, but obviously we had some other things we needed to address last week.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even realize when we were talking about putting together kind of the docket for this show this week that this was already a week old as we're sitting here
Yeah.
discussing it, and obviously by the time this goes out on Wednesday, it'll be even a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But yeah, the big news that kind of some of the big news that took the gaming world by storm last week, apart from all of the abuse and those conversations, was that Mixer kind of very suddenly uprooted and basically Microsoft decided they're going to be kind of closing Mixer down and partnering instead with Facebook Gaming here in July. On July 22nd is when the Microsoft is going to be closing down and migrating that service over. And this news, I remember seeing it break kind of on Twitter as a ton of streamers were finding out firsthand that like their streaming platform is no longer going to be a thing, as well as even many Mixer staff members were finding out like through the news channels instead of having been like prepped ahead of time. And it seemed that really some of the people who had been prepped ahead of time were some of the big streamers like Ninja and Shroud, who it came out had basically been offered. They were basically bought out of their remaining Mixer contracts. They were invited to move with Mixer over to Facebook Gaming, but instead, at least those two, and potentially some other like high level exclusive contract streamers were also given the option to buy out of their contracts. And so I think the big numbers I saw kind of making the rounds that day were Ninja's deal was basically for $30 million. That was his Mixer exclusivity deal that he had just signed earlier this year. God, time is all a blur. I don't remember if it was earlier this year or late last year. But it was basically like it had been less than a year, and that was one of that kind of like Mixer trying to gobble up some of those big exclusive streamers was one of their big strategies to try and get people to the site. And what we're seeing here is that even those strategies weren't working. Mixer still had, they were still ranking like fourth in streamer viewership and streamer hours, even as over these last few months, streaming has taken off a little bit more with people in their houses and having more time to consume that kind of content. Mixer wasn't seeing the gains that Twitch was. Twitch is still eating Mixer's lunch left and right. And so some of those big kind of Ninja and Shroud were able to kind of walk away, and they're not beholden to their exclusivity deal anymore. They're free agents again, effectively. And I don't follow their scene enough. At last I saw, neither of them have made any kind of announcements on what they're going to be doing, but that may have changed, either that I've just missed or kind of in the time since. But yeah, there was very much a kind of a human interest cost around this, in that like seemingly as with everything else, like the rich of the rich just got richer on this, and the people who were struggling or who had spent their years trying to build up an audience on Mixer, because it wasn't Twitch and they were trying to be a big fish in a smaller pond or something like that. Suddenly they had their legs taken out from under them, and they're now having to reevaluate and figure out, do they want to go to Facebook Gaming? Many of them, it seems, do not, and so many of them are probably going to end up on Twitch. But in the grander like corporate structure of things, this also means that like Twitch has all the bargaining power there, and there's with one less player in the game, Twitch isn't going to be as like Twitch just has a lot more power now in the situation. They don't have the the low latency pluses that Mixer had breathing down their neck anymore. So they're, need to innovate to try and kind of keep up with some of the technological differences between the platforms. Twitch doesn't really have to care. Twitch is, and I don't think Twitch ever really had to care that much. But when, big guys like Ninja left their platform, that certainly was a hit to their revenue. I have no doubt. To what degree, I don't know. But now that they're likely going to come back, like Twitch could just kind of go back to pretending like everything was good anyway. So yeah, I think those are kind of the big bullet points of the story. One of the little follow-ups I saw that kind of happened over the weekend is one of the original founders of Mixer, Beam, like back when it was Beam. What's the guy's name? Matt Salzamendi, who was fucking 16 when he founded Beam, and is 22 now, and probably like a millionaire kind of thing, because he basically left a year or so ago after he left sometime after Microsoft bought Beam and rebranded it Mixer. He kind of came out and spoke over the weekend to GeekWire in an interview, talking about how like he absolutely understands that like it sucks. There's a human cost to all the streamers that are feeling the crunch right now, but also he like totally gets why Microsoft is walking away from it. If they were putting as much money as they were over the last few years to try and grow Mixer, and then they just weren't seeing the return on that investment. He kind of chimed in and totally recognized why they were doing what they're doing and why they're making the shift to Facebook, which has just by its like natural install base has a significantly higher potential for audience. It's just a matter of getting people in the Facebook ecosystem to move over to the like live or gaming tabs on their apps or on their browser windows and stuff. So, but it has a much larger install base effectively than Mixer ever did. So he kind of touches on like understanding why Mixer and Microsoft is kind of walking away from really trying to drive this platform themselves, and instead partnering with somebody who kind of already has a platform that they can just kind of merge into.
It's interesting for me where the part that I'm most fascinated by isn't so much the people who, like you said, kind of got rich and are going to do their own thing. Anyway, it is like the people who were struggling to make it on Mixer, or who were we're trying to become a big fish in a smaller pond. And now you presented, I think, like two options, obviously, which is they go to Facebook Gaming or they go to Twitch. But like, I wonder what percentage of these people are just, I'm done, right? Like, just say, you know what, it's not worth it anymore. Like, everything I just built is just gonna be wiped out, and like, I don't want to do it all again. Like, I really am curious of like those kind of human interest stories and like that kind of in-depth profile. And like, I'm sure like if on Twitter there are those kind of stories already popping off and those kind of threads like populated in the thing, but like that's who I'm most curious about, is people who are just like, I'm done. Like, it's just like all the years they would have had to put in, all the time they would, like, all the hours, and then just like boom.
One of the stories I remember seeing pop up on Twitter, I'm speaking to this, but I only ever tuned into Mixer for one streamer, Joe Ruffler, friend of certainly our community kind of stuff, who was making a lot of strides on Mixer, but even he left Mixer, I want to say back in like February or something, and kind of made his move over to Twitch. Just because I think he saw maybe some of the writing on the wall. But so I really don't know who was streaming and who was doing stuff on Mixer, just because that wasn't the platform I ever used. But I did see him retweeting a lot of stories kind of as this news was breaking, and I remember seeing somebody that he retweeted basically like in tears because she had been banned from Twitch some years ago. And had gone. I don't know like why. I don't know the ins and outs of that situation. But basically, Twitch wasn't an option for her. So now her option really is only Facebook Gaming. Maybe try YouTube, Live or whatever that that is. But even that, like that really didn't come up into the conversation as much as are people going to go to Twitch, or are they going to move over to Facebook Gaming with with kind of the Mixer, base or whatever. And so yeah, like that, a story like that of like, well, Twitch isn't an option for her. What is she going to end up doing? I don't know, but I'm sure her audience will, a part of her audience will try and support and help her out as they can. It's just a matter of like, is that audience large enough to be sustainable or all that stuff? And that's, I would never, and admittedly, like even on our site, like I had like grand, dreams of streaming and stuff back when we launched this stuff, but hey, life is busy, and kind of the podcasts take the most precedent, I think, for us.
Yeah.
But it's still something I want to explore. But even back before we launched, there were conversations of like, do we try and do Mixer? Do we try and do Twitch? And even back then it was like, no, like Twitch is the option because they just have so much of the market share that anything else it's not worth trying to build an audience anywhere else, at least in kind of like my analysis, trying to jump in. If you already have an audience and want to go and stay, I'm going to go start doing stuff on Mixer, then like you're going to do a little bit better. But if you're trying to like build from scratch, kind of doing the work on Twitch you're going to have like the best chance of getting eyes, just because that's where most of the eyes are anyway.
It's curious too. Like I wonder. It's a shitty situation, I feel like, where so many people are just going to kind of get screwed over, and like I really am curious. Like everything about the rollout of this announcement just seems really bad to me. Like they should have given more kind of, I think, like heads up to all the different streamers of like different sizes, and they did. It appears there should have been some sort of, I think, almost for lack of a better word, like plan. It seemed like there was no real plan in place for like any of the human consequences of this action, and I don't know, like, and so there's all of these kind of complications and thoughts I have in my head. But then, like, weirdly, like one of the big things I'm thinking about too is what happens to all of the video library on Mixer too. Like, what is going to happen to all of the videos and all of the content on Mixer as well? Like, I want, like, do they have some sort of plan to house them on Mixer for, 6 months or a year or a month, or what is their long-term strategy with all this video as well on the site? Like, and we joked at the beginning of the episode where it's like this news is a week old, and by the time this episode goes live, it'll be 9 days old. But it's still, that's bizarre, both because A, time is a flat circle, but B, because for something that's going to be 9 days old when this goes live, I feel like we still don't have that much news about what is really happening, right? Like, I still have so many more questions than I do answers, and so much more like curiosity is just like sparks. Like, anytime I ask a question, I'm just like, well, what about this and this and this and this and this too? Like, it just feels like the incorrect way to shut down a streaming service. And like, granted, there probably isn't a great way, but like this definitely doesn't seem like the ideal way to have done it. And I think the kind of human backlash to this, I think, is the clearest example yet of that.
Yeah, I think I think the big component is the runway that people need, because they're to your point, like, as soon as they notify streamers, that's going to be out there for everybody. Like, some streamer is going to immediately go out there and be like, they're shutting down Mixer. So there's no way to do it, to make the announcement en masse and keep it like under wraps for certain segments of that audience. So it probably still had to hit staff and the public and the streamers probably around the same time. But if that could have been, hey, we're going to be doing this over the course of the next X number of months, I think that would have been a lot more, a much easier pill to swallow for people. The fact that it was basically on June 22nd is when the news broke, and they basically said you have a month. July 22nd is when stuff is going to basically start migrating over to Facebook gaming. I think the brevity of that time is really what a lot of people, especially a lot of people who are feeling a pinch in their regular lives because of the pandemic and stuff. That's just going to be accentuated by this news as well. But again, like Microsoft for years had been throwing good money after bad on this, so like from a business stance, I get why they're making the decision. It's probably best to try and like have made this and get this out of the way now before they really start diving into Xbox Series X stuff theoretically here in a week or two, or whenever their July event is going to be. And they also, one of the things that is also a part of this that is less on the Mixer side of things, but the partnership with Facebook is also intended to really work xCloud into the Facebook ecosystem as well, for their kind of game streaming over there. So there's a lot more than just the Mixer component to the business relationship that they're working on. But yeah, it's still like it sucks, and 1 month notice for a lot of these people is not enough time to have their, I mean, like it just like if your company, decided, hey, we're going to have to close our doors. Sorry, everybody, you get, a month severance or something like that. That's, what a lot of these people are probably going through. And that's, trying to find new work or new platforms and new jobs in a time where there's record unemployment numbers and stuff is not the most not the most exciting environment to step out into in the world right now. Like I said, for people who had an audience on Mixer, hopefully a lot of their audience will follow them to whatever their next platform is. But there might be a lot of people out there that didn't want to go, like went to Mixer because they don't want to be on Twitch and they don't like the Twitch platform and stuff. So maybe they won't follow their favorite streamers and stuff. And then you start to like realize how much of your audience was really your audience versus how much of your audience was the platform's audience. And you just kind of got to pull a bit of it for a brief time. But yeah, lots of pain and heartache going out to all those people. So wishing everybody affected really kind of all the best and hope they land on their feet in whatever way. And at the same time, like, kind of fuck Ninja for getting to take $30 million and walk away. And not have to do anything while so many of those other people are going to be hurting. That's it's just kind of like one of those, well, yep, even in gaming, we have the fucking elite of the elite that are gonna get the quote unquote looting, while everybody else, is gonna hurt and suffer.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts on the Mixer story, Trev?
No, I don't think so. I think we've hit on a lot of the points I can certainly speak to.
Then we're gonna shift over to our second story of the episode, which is a more nebulously titled. It is leaked footage, leaked stories, leaked everything from a Harry Potter game in development has been kind of spinning around the industry, I would say, for years at this point. And was it a Bloomberg article, Trevor?
Yeah. It's Jason Schreier. Jason
Schreier had a feature about kind of that Harry Potter game, both essentially confirming its reality, but also dealing with kind of some of the ramifications of the teams trying to make a game in a pandemic, and also make a game for a franchise as beloved and kind of fundamental to generations of kids as Harry Potter, while the creator said franchise is kind of becoming almost a villain of her own self, and kind of the conflicted nature of the development team on that, the hardship of making the game in COVID and everything in between. A few weeks ago, whenever we kind of talked about pitching our own games, I talked about a Harry Potter video game briefly with that episode. It was kind of the dream game if I could make one game in the industry, and this conversation is going to probably touch a little bit on that, but I imagine we'll also get quite into JK and just everything involved in this game. So kind of initial thoughts on everything and all the kind of information that's come out about the Harry Potter video game, Trev.
Yeah, so one of the things I talked about when because Frank originally kind of like pitched this as the B story for today's episode, and I hopped in, I read the Bloomberg article, and I was like, there's not really much there in terms of like details on the game itself. It's more just it's weird because Jason Schreier has a tendency to do this sometimes, where he just kind of like stealth confirms a game, but like that's not the main focus of his story.
Nope.
Like I remember back when he was like reporting on, I think, like a Mafia 3 story or what the Mafia team was working on, which probably ended up now being the remaster and the trilogy remaster kind of thing that has come out in the last month or so. He like also just kind of like stealth through in there. Oh yeah, and also a team at 2K is working on the next BioShock, and like that was just kind of like a throwaway in the thing. And so here it very much was the Harry Potter game at WB has been kind of long rumored, and people have like in the industry known about it. It's one of those, worst kept secrets in the industry kind of thing. And here he's just kind of like announcing and taking for granted that, yeah, that game's real. It's being worked on by Avalanche in Salt Lake. And the story here is much more about how some of the team members are concerned about what J.K. Rowling is going out and saying, and how that's going to impact, reception of the game. And also how, as you kind of touched on, the pandemic has drastically adjusted the marketing rollout of that game. It's kind of discussed in the article that the original plan would have seen both the Batman game that's now pretty much going to be announced at the DC Fandom next month. That and the Harry Potter game were going to be announced at a WB kind of E3 press conference. But with the pandemic canceling E3, this got kicked down the line, and they're going to focus. WB's going to focus on the Batman game at Fandom, and then this is going to be formally announced somewhere down the line after that. Still, and that's when we'll start seeing stuff. This, like, the article really kind of touches on the fact that the footage from 2018 that kind of made the rounds is real, but a lot of the other rumors that have come out since are not. Said one of the people working on it, and so. That's kind of like really what the article is really tackling and touching on, is the idea that, J.K. Rowling is going out there and saying a lot of stuff that, is very transphobic in nature, and how is the team kind of like responding to that? Because while J.K. has some involvement in, signing off on certain elements of the story, they also kind of make a point to say, like, she is not heavily involved in this project, and they're going to have to probably do something to kind of distance herself a little bit further on that. And so, yeah, the article again kind of touches on, like, people are having conversations around the Slack water cooler, like, about like, hey, this is rough, and I don't know how to feel about the person behind this whole mythical world that we're working in, coming out here and saying these things, and what's that going to mean for this. Also coupled in this is also the stories that kind of came out in the last few weeks about Warner Brothers potentially selling off their games division. Because there is an element that this is a project that has been in the works for a long time, and so if Warner Brothers did end up selling that off, this might be on the cutting room floor of like, hey, you guys, too much has already been spent on this with very little to show for it at this point, so we're just going to walk away from it and kind of cut ties with that project. That is a very real thing that could happen if WB kind of moves forward with those kinds of plans to sell. They do. Who's it? One of the analysts from Bloomberg kind of touches on in the article that a deal was those stuff kind of came out the last couple weeks, 2 weeks ago, about AT&T buying, right? So AT&T like owns Warner Brothers, I guess. Them selling it off. they do kind of touch on in this article that a deal isn't imminent. But if there's basically a whole lot of uncertainty around the project is kind of what the crux of the issue or the article is really touching on, because of elements like that. I remember when that news broke a couple weeks ago. We didn't really tackle it on the show because I think that was around the time the PS5 launch stuff was all happening.
Yeah,
and so
I think it was.
That certainly took our kind of attention. But like, I hear stuff like that, and I'm like, well, I don't. When we see the games industry making hand and foot money over the film industry, I don't understand necessarily what Warner Brothers' intention would be deciding like, hey, this is the part of our business we're going to sell off, unless they're just not doing like it. That strikes me as like bad Warner Brothers leadership that doesn't understand the video game potential, the revenue potential of the video game industry and the video game side of their thing, especially when they have IP like Warner Brothers or like Batman, like Harry Potter, even Mad Max. I'm sure sold well enough for that franchise and for that game. So the fact that they're like even considering that in order to focus on the industry that they know better, it strikes me as like a whole bunch of old people from the film side of things that are uncomfortable with the video game side of things, and instead of like getting people who are more comfortable and who can maximize the growth potential of the video game side of things, they're just going to walk away from it. And it's like, that would be a terribly stupid decision, in my opinion, as a business graduate. I would not look at the world's like largest and fastest growing industry and say, let's get out of that. Like we've already got a pretty good foothold in it. Let's walk away from that, so we can focus on the Snyder Cut of Justice League instead, and HBO Max and that stuff. Like I don't understand that rationale, but I'm also not the CEO of any of those companies, so be it.
It's interesting because just like starting with the Son of Games division part, it 100% to me smacks of a bunch of old guys in their 70s who've never played a video game after like Pong, being like, we don't get it. Like, we can use this money to, spend more on the film division side of things or like the TV side of things or whatever kind of things, real products, right? And like wanted to get out of it from that way, right? Like, I just feel like, to your point, this is the fastest growing like medium in terms of entertainment, and WB already has such a great foothold. Like, it's not like they make games and the games are like successful. It's like their games are incredibly successful at Rocksteady and like with everything involving Batman. And then add on to that, we have one of the most iconic characters of all time. How about Harry Potter as well? One of the most iconic characters of all time. And it's like, with two such heavy hitters, in addition to Mad Max, and people liked that game, like, they already are in such a strong position, like such an enviable position to be in, and they seem to just want to make the wrong decision. Like, everything involved in Warner Brothers just kind of makes me like, you're not running your film division correctly.
Yeah.
You're not
really... Lord of the Rings games as well. They have that on lockdown too.
Yeah,
the Shadow of War games.
You are actually doing good with your video game side of things, so you might as well get rid of that too. And like, TV wise, shout out to CW, I guess. Like, I mean, like, what are we doing here? Like, that's like, I just don't understand it from like any side of the thing. Like, this to me is almost like for Sony back in the day when like the only part of them that were making money was the PlayStation. Be like, you know what? We're tired of games. We're gonna get rid of the PS. We're gonna sell off the PlayStation side of our aspect here. It's like, this is like the thing that is like the most successful that you do currently is video games. You're very good at it. To get rid of this in favor of, to a joke, the Snyder Cut or another Hobbit trilogy just seems bizarre. Like, I don't understand. Like, what really are you going to use this money on, right? Like, and to say nothing of the fact that the most successful movies of all time are movies that make like $1 billion at the box office, right? And like, if you have a really successful video game, you can make millions far quicker, right? Like, and like that will last far longer too, just as importantly, right? Like, if you have a successful game with like DLC spread out, or have it be like a paid to play, like there are so many options to make way more money for longer as well in the video game space than there is in movies. And I'd even go as far as to say, like, especially the kind of movies you're trying to make, like these giant blockbusters that take like 3 years to come out with, and it's like that's how long it takes a video game to get made, which again is going to make more money than the Snyder Cut or HBO Max or the CW or like what are we talking about here? Like, this is such a like, so yeah, that reeks of like we're 70-year-old men who don't understand what we're talking about. From the like game development side of it, I'm really just curious about it, and this is kind of opened. This potentially opens into a larger conversation that we cannot have or we can have of just like, again, separating, right, like the art from the artist, right? Like I feel like we as an industry kind of come back to that conversation a lot. Or maybe it's just people I know do, but I mean, this is, I think, a pretty classic example, right? As two people, and me and you, who are each massive Harry Potter fans, trying to reconcile, like JK's increasing like Malfoy-esque turn at times, and like it's bizarre because it's interesting because JK. No, like Malfoy is a good. I think Malfoy is actually kind of an like maybe is actually kind of all right. Where it's like JK doesn't think what she's saying is wrong. That's like the thing. Like it wouldn't be like. It's not like she's like malevolently being like, yeah, I hate everyone. It's like she thinks she's making sense is the thing, just like a Malfoy does, and then she just like says this stuff, and you're just like, what are you talking about, right? Like listen to literally like the entire cast of the films all say the opposite, and maybe be like, maybe I need to like think about this one. You know what I mean? Like, I think.
Did you see what happened over the weekend with Stephen King?
Yeah, I did. Weird enough, I was at work today and like just like happened to see that as like a Twitter like trending thing.
Yeah. For those that don't know, like Stephen King tweeted or retweeted or something that she had said, kind of unrelated to that. But then when somebody asked Stephen King, like, what is your opinion on trans lives? Basically, he was like, trans women are women, and J.K. Rowling had. After Stephen King had like supported her, wrote this like very thankful, like, I've always looked up to Stephen. I'm so appreciative that he's got my back on this. And then when he said the trans women are women thing, she deleted the thing and has apparently blocked him now on Twitter. So she just completely like put her foot in it even more. And the people that are like responding to that are like, make no mistake, the person who makes their living writing isn't just bad at like communicating this thought that she has. She is specifically anti-trans when her response to somebody saying trans women are women is to block them or to, delete any kind of like praise of them. That is very much an anti-trans kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, I like. That's pretty much how I see the situation, and it's interesting. I don't know much about Ender's Game outside of the fact that I know the author behind Ender's Game is super problematic, and that's one of the comparisons I've seen a lot over the last couple months. Is anytime kind of she has these flare ups, it's young people like oh no, what's happening with the person who created Harry Potter, and then like the old guy in the corner being like, let me tell you about Ender's Game. And all the issues that have come out with that. And so it is very much to that kind of like, how do you disassociate the creation from the creator when the creator becomes problematic? And it's something I struggle with a lot personally. I try and justify it a lot of the times because by knowing that the creation is not usually the thing of like that one person. So if I end up going and buying this game, I know that J.K. Rowling is only a very small piece of that puzzle, and I would much rather. I don't want to not support the developers that put 3 to 5 to however many years of their life into making a Harry Potter game that I'm interested in playing, just because J.K. Rowling is a dumbass. I would much rather I will even go to the extent of like making a show if I really need to or really feel like compelled to, but like I'll go and buy the game and then I'll be like, and also I'm donating $60 to this trans charity in J.K. Rowling's name just to piss her off or something like that, that kind of thing. Like I think back to even Borderlands 3 last year, where it's like I absolutely don't want to support Randy Pitchford, and I'm annoyed that like part of my purchase and support of Borderlands 3 and the fact that like because of everybody's kind of like because of our disparate game of the year conversations, that game ended up being that Nerdy Site's game of the year. It's like, as I was putting that together, I was like, I don't quite know how I feel about this. Not great really, but I also recognize that Borderlands 3 is more than Randy Pitchford. And that Randy Pitchford is such a small component of that I don't want other people to suffer because he's an asshole and does a whole bunch of dumb shit. It's not fair to the rest of the team that had no other option but to work under him on that project, kind of thing. So that tends to be how, at least in the game side of things. I mean, same with like Last of Us Part 2. Hearing the stories of Crunch sucks. And I there's a part of me that doesn't want to support that, but also I do still want to support the work that all those people put into it. I can still, lambast and lament crunch culture and the kind of the industry that directs that, but also want to support and honor the work that it caused or that it created.
It's interesting for me too, where JK is such an interesting person, right? Where like she has been such like an unabashed like feminist for how like she was such a I feel like she was so ahead of the curve on that like front line and that battle. So
like I would love seeing her like dunk on Pierce Morgan and stuff like that, right?
That's
I think that's
like,
the right name.
She was so ahead of the curve on that, and like she was so far on the front of that. Like that's what makes it, for me at least, almost more jarring. Where it's like, and this is where like that ends, and it's like you're so progressive and ahead of people on this issue of like women's rights and feminism and everything around that. That then when we get to these people, like then we get to you being like, these aren't real women. It's like, but why? Like you of all people should understand the destructive nature of like what you're saying, right? Like your entire saga can be distilled down into like the like effects of like hate and like us versus them mentalities and like all these things. Like you spend literal like chapters talking about like the effects of like slurs and like oppressiveness and all like this is what Harry Potter is, and then for you to seemingly not get the lesson in this area is so bizarre to me, right? And like to the point of like, can the art be bigger than the person? I mean, I think in the case of, in this particular case of J.K. and Harry Potter, I think the answer for me at least is yes. It's easily for me to be the fact that I can separate J.K. and the books, because in a weird way the books are doing what she seemingly is unable to any longer, which is promote this message of like hope and empathy and understanding and giving these very clear-cut lessons of the consequences of doing what she's doing, right? And I think it's very disappointing to see the state of what JK is kind of doing and who she's kind of becoming, right? Like it's a weird like last act heel turn, right? Like if you, again, like I think the thing I said before is like if you'd been in like 2005 and been like, yo, in the year 2020 people are gonna be in love with George Lucas and kind of hate JK, nobody would have believed it then. And like that's like the weird like upside down world we're in right now.
Yeah, there is an element to that there are people, I'm sure, that back then would have been like, I can see that, because one of the things that this is kind of reminding me is she has had a history of not being great about LGBTQ issues. The fact that Dumbledore is gay,
though. Yeah.
Dumbledore is gay, but that was not in the books. Like that is something she did not put in the books. she didn't she dropped that in a Muggle in a Muggle net, or not Muggle net, but like a Pottermore story after the last book came out. After, so she like it may have been an element that she, was comfortable enough kind of like building into the backstory of the character, but for the people who are ever only going to consume the 7 books, they don't know that Dumbledore is gay. They don't know what that relationship with Grindelwald, the subtext of that. Like, and there, I remember there being a lot of like think pieces at the time when she like confirmed that Dumbledore was gay. There were a lot of people in the gay community that were like, well, then why didn't you say that in the books? Why didn't you give us that hero and that icon in the books themselves? Why are you counting it as like a DLC thing on the side? And she didn't really have a great response to that at the time. I remember she kind of also got defensive in the way a lot of this is. So when I see some of this stuff come up, I see a lot of those people that kind of started writing her off back then kind of coming out and being like, this, like, I'm sorry you guys are all just now catching up to this, but this is what we felt back then. That like, yeah, it's not like a complete, cut off. It like there is an appreciation that this iconic character she recognizes and is, in canon gay, but that would be like, in the expanded universe of Star Wars coming out and saying like Darth Vader also, was blah, 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 or whatever. Most of the audience isn't experiencing that additional content, that additional stuff. So, I mean, even Cam and I talked about this in I think maybe a Mandalorian D+ show or something like that. We talked about I think it was when we were talking about the behind the scenes on the Mandalorian. Cam went down this rabbit hole of like some of the things that are introduced in the now canon expanded universe stuff that Disney has been putting out, and I was like, yeah, but none of that like if it was around all the Qui-Gon stuff. Like Qui-Gon has been built up even more outside of the films now that Disney has taken over, but for most people, Qui-Gon is what Qui-Gon is in The Phantom Menace, and that's it. That is people's only experience with Qui-Gon Jinn. So you can't, like, you can put other stuff out there, but you don't get, like, a pass for putting it out there in mediums and content that 90% of your audience aren't going to experience or consume. It was, I mean, when Darth Maul showed up in Solo, like, more people than not were probably confused by what that was, because they knew, if they hadn't been watching Clone Wars and stuff, was that he died in Phantom Menace. So
cut right in half.
Exactly. It's like, how do you come back from that? Oh, there's this, great saga of stories in the Clone Wars and also in Rebels that kind of like expand on the, the saga of Darth Maul, because they wanted to kind of bring back that fan favorite character. But for the general public, they didn't know that. And we might see here in the Fantastic Beasts storyline, they might more openly address the idea of Dumbledore is gay kind of thing, which helps cement that for people that didn't just read the books. It will be supported in the film, universe as well. But it is still like, if it was that pivotal to the character, and it's that idea that we see a lot in the last few years in films, being like, look, we've got a gay character or we've got like a gay scene, we've got a gay kiss in our movie, and it's just a throwaway moment in a movie. It's like, you don't get praise for putting something that should just be like accepted and normal in there, just because it's your first, and especially if you put it in there in a way that you can cut around it for, China distribution or something like that.
Star Wars.
Exactly. If you're gonna do that, and you really want the news headlines to back that up, you also need to back that up and say, no, we're gonna put it out in this format in China, and if you don't accept that, then you're not gonna get to see our movie. But they fear the bottom line, and they're not interested in putting out those more American values in that, if it's going to affect the bottom line that way. So I feel like that is something that J.K. Rowling has struggled with since, late in the Harry Potter run, where she, recognized that Dumbledore is gay, but also didn't put it in the books proper. And this is just kind of the latest chapter of that side of her story.
It's interesting. Like, the final thing I really will say is something that you said, which is, right, like, you kind of say it after the fact that Dumbledore's gay, and so now it's canon. And to me, it's a thing of like, but is it, right? Because, like, to your point of like, Dumbledore is not gay in the books, right? Like, there's never like, so canonly, if you just read the books and you've never read an interview J.K. Rowling ever gives, and then even watch like the 2 Fantastic Beasts movies so far, like, he's never just like, and then there's Dumbledore, he's gay. It's just like never mentioned. And so like canon, it's this weird thing of like, well, it's canon since like J.K. said it is, but if you just read the actual works that she's produced, it's not shown there. So it is this weird like token DLC thing tacked on because she got asked a question and was like, oh, we've got a gay character, it's this go on. And it's like, yeah, but you don't ever support that in anything that you've done here. Like, there's no, you're like, what are you talking about here from, right? And like, I could have a whole other conversation about like the weird, to me, like Qui-Gon Jinn like deification that's happening in Star Wars that like I just don't really understand. But
yeah.
that's a topic for another podcast. But just, yeah, like my kind of final thoughts on this is just, it's disappointing, right? Like, it's that thing of, I think JK is someone who did create this work that has inspired generations of people, right? And in particular, I think it should be said, created characters and set an example through her own actions and through her own words that like provided an example of a strong, intelligent, brilliant woman, right? Like somebody who did carry that confidence and who was really smart, who very much kind of had this Hermione element to him that people could look up to, especially young girls. And so I think it's all the more disappointed that then you, as time kind of goes on, and you can trace it back to 2007 when kind of Deathly Hallows came out, or you can trace it to whenever you want to, but like unquestionably now it's kind of looking back and like all the more disappointed that she's someone who I think was an example of so many people, to then kind of increasingly be someone who is excluding others in that, right? And who is kind of pushing people away, and who kind of is, whether kind of inadvertently or not, becoming the thing that she fought so hard against, both in her work kind of for women's rights across the globe, but also just in terms of the characters she was creating and the story she's trying to tell, and I think the ideals that we should strive for of a more inclusive world, and a world bringing people together and bridging, I think, barriers of race or sex or anything else, whatever it might be, that is kind of the dominant theme of Harry Potter, and it just makes it that much more disappointing that she herself has begun to lose sight of that, or maybe lost sight of it long ago.
Yeah. It's interesting that when we originally talked about this being the B story, it was like, okay, we'll talk about it a little bit, and then we'll pitch our, dream Harry Potter game, and then we instead went down this path. But I think, for me personally, a much more interesting conversation to have in this moment, certainly than like, oh yeah, I want to see Quidditch VR again or something like that.
Yeah, so that's the episode. Thank you for listening. If you like what you heard, you can go support us over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, like all of our wonderful patrons have. Thank you all very much. Your support has made so many shows possible, including this one, and we appreciate each and every one of you. So thank you all for doing that. And again, it is patreon.com/thatnerdysite. If you want to support what you just heard. You can also go like, subscribe, listen, download, share with your friends, retweet, give 5 stars to the show on all kinds of podcast services around the globe. If you wouldn't mind, it'd be wonderful if you could go rate and review us on iTunes. It really does help, especially for a newer show like this. We're only 9 episodes in. Next week is episode 10, Trevor. You got your party poppers. And so we really do appreciate that support and all of the listens and downloads and views. And then, yeah, I don't really know if I don't have any shout outs, Trevor, if you don't have any shout outs, so we'll move.
Just a quick shout out.
Quick shout out from Trevor Starkey.
I sat down and listened to today. Actually, I don't think I'm even done with it yet, but I started listening to it. Obviously I've been playing Last of Us Part 2. I finished that over the weekend. As my second playthrough of it over the weekend, got the platinum and stuff, and I'm working on the review for the site now. And so now that I'm done with the game, I'm starting to go out and like consume some of that other content. And I want to give a shout out to the Kind of Funny We Have Cool Friends with Laura Bailey that came out today as we're recording, where she the first hour plus of the episode, I think, or the first half of the episode is very much just kind of her talking about her role in The Last of Us Part 2. It's very spoiler filled, so don't dive into it if you haven't played the game. But I just want to give a shout out to that, especially because I didn't realize the like hate and harassment she was getting online for her character, and I just hate that every time. I think it's such bullshit that like people can't disassociate a character from an actor from a character. So it's not fair that she was getting a lot of hate on that. So give Laura Bailey and that episode of We Have Cool Friends a shout out.
Absolutely will do that. Otherwise, you can find Trevor at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter. Anything that you want to plug from this past week's, or more than that, of That Nerdy Site content, Trev?
Just the That Nerdy Site show that went out this week is a very brief episode, about 20 minutes, I think, of me just kind of sitting down. For those that didn't hear, across our social media platforms or any of that other stuff, Ben and Chloe from That Wannabe Film Class, as well as Christian from That Anime Pod, have all decided that they're going to kind of, now's the right time for them to step down and move on from That Nerdy Site. So within a week, basically our site has drastically changed, and that may ultimately end up leading to some changes in our content and whatnot here in the coming months. So just kind of that episode is part me reading their formal kind of like announcement statements, and then also just kind of solo processing in almost real time, like here's how, here's my take on this, here's how it might affect the show and stuff. So check that out. It's like I said, it's a short listen, but it also brings people up to speed on the events of the site last week.
Absolutely. You can find myself at Lefty Logie on Twitter. I would echo Trevor's thoughts. I think this week's That Nerdy Site show is an important one to listen to. Obviously, the site is going to kind of be undergoing some changes. It has been undergoing changes these past few weeks. And it'll be exciting and interesting to see what kind of shape the site looks like in a few months from now. I'm optimistic. We're a motley crew, but a good crew, and so
I mean the key takeaway is we're not going anywhere.
No.
That I talk about in the episode. I was like, I would be lying if I didn't say that like it would be easier if I just kind of said like, all right, this was a fun experiment, I'm going to close everything up now. But I think there's still enough that I want to keep doing with the site that we're not going to close our doors now. We might be, I don't dive into this or anything like that, but one of the things I'm certainly kind of keeping on my mind is trying to figure out if there are other voices that I know of and want to bring into kind of the fold, how we can maybe try and do that moving forward. But no plans, nothing to announce on that front.
Yeah, agreed. And then finally, you can find That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site on Twitter, Instagram, and all the other social media wonderful platforms out there. Again, as we kind of mentioned last week, and Trevor mentions every week that he hosts podcasts, we say and usually end these shows with thank you for listening, stay nerdy, play your games. I think somebody says play your games, doesn't matter. Stay nerdy, be good to each other. And in the wake of all kinds of news in the past week, and in just in the state of the world in general, which is slightly on fire at the moment, that carries even more weight and is even more important. To be good to each other, to be kind, to listen, to be empathetic. It will be the sign-off of this podcast going forward. And so, yeah. Stay nerdy, be good to each other.